Welcome to Four Quarter Lives, a podcast exploring the profound impact of longer lives and careers on everything: countries, companies, couples, and careers. I'm Avivah Wittenberg-Cox, and on this week's Four Quarter Lives, I summarize a mini-series we've been running called Longevity in Action. If you listen regularly to this podcast, you'll know that we often talk about the big picture of longevity. We talk about demographics, but the fact that many of us will now live into our 80s and 90s, maybe even beyond. We talk about the shift away from the old three-stage life: education, work, retirement, toward longer and more flexible life courses and careers. But one of the questions I'm asked most often is very practical. What does longevity look like in action? Who is already adapting? And which organizations are already redesigning things for longer lives, and how? Because longevity is no longer a distant demographic forecast. It's happening right before our eyes. So in this mini-series, I spoke with three leaders in very different sectors who are already experimenting with answers. One works inside large public health systems, one works in global hospitality, and one in telecoms and digital tech. Three very different worlds. But what struck me in these conversations is how similar the underlying themes are. Longevity isn't just about medicine, pensions, or retirement planning. It's about how we redesign systems so that longer lives actually work. And across these three conversations, three ideas kept appearing: influence, accessibility, and dignity. Let's start with influence, the power of experience. My first conversation in the series was with Helen Bevan. She's one of the UK's leading thinkers on large-scale change, particularly in the NHS and other large public institutions. If you've ever tried to change anything inside a large organization, a hospital system, a university, a government department, you'll know that these systems are incredibly complex. They rarely change quickly, and they almost never change simply because someone at the top decides they should. Helen talks about something she calls change from the middle. The idea is that in large systems, transformation rarely comes from the very top or the newest people. Instead, change tends to come from people in the middle of the organization who understand how things really work. They know the formal structures, but they also know the informal networks. They know who influences whom and where decisions really get made. And they have credibility across the organization. Many of these people, it will not surprise you to hear, are in the later stages of their careers. They're the experienced professionals who have spent decades inside these institutions. Traditionally, organizations have sometimes treated this group as a problem, assuming they resist change. But Helen's work suggests almost the opposite. Experienced professionals often have exactly the qualities required to drive transformation. They have the patience to navigate bureaucracy. They have the networks required to move ideas across departments. And they have the credibility to bring people along. In other words, experience becomes influence. And in a world where careers are getting longer, that influence becomes incredibly valuable. The second point is accessibility. So here we're going to talk about longevity for everyone. The second conversation in the series took us into hospitality. I spoke with Jean-Yves Minet, who leads the mid-scale and economy brands at Groupe Accor, including Novotel. Jean-Yves pointed out that much of the longevity conversation today has become extremely elite. We hear about longevity clinics, biohacking, highly specialized medical interventions. But if longevity is truly one of the defining shifts of this century, it can't remain a luxury product. It's got to become part of everyday life. And Jean-Yves describes Novotel's approach as quiet well-being. Instead of promising dramatic anti-age breakthroughs, the focus is on the everyday habits that support long-term health: sleep, nutrition, movement, connection. The real question becomes, how can environments make these habits easier? Hotels are fascinating places because they bring together travelers, workers, families, and communities. They're places where people sleep, eat, work, and meet. So the idea is to design these environments in ways that support healthier habits, redesigning social spaces to encourage interaction, offering menus that make healthier choices easier, creating environments that encourage movement, designing meeting spaces that support energy and focus. None of this is dramatic, and that's the point. Small improvements over time can compound into meaningful health benefits. Longevity becomes embedded in everyday life. And finally, dignity and the digital confidence gap. The third conversation focused on technology, and I spoke with Milena Albright of AT&T. She introduced the idea I'd never heard of digital dignity. Many older adults struggle with technology not because they lack devices, but because they lack confidence. People worry about making mistakes, they worry about scams, they worry about looking foolish. As a result, they sometimes avoid technology altogether. So AT&T is addressing this through their connected learning centers located in trusted community spaces like libraries or community centers across the U.S. Training begins with the most basic skills, turning on a device, connecting to Wi-Fi, sending an email, and confidence grows step by step. Participants then learn about privacy, passwords, and online safety. The results, she says, can be transformative. People reconnect with family, gain access to services, sometimes even return to work. Increasingly, AI assistants are making technology easier to navigate, allowing users to ask questions in plain language. Curiosity doesn't age out. People remain capable of learning throughout their lives. So across these three conversations, we see the same pattern of a longevity shift. It's forcing us to redesign the systems around us. Workplaces must rethink how they use experience. Customer environments are moving to support healthier habits, and technology has got to be inclusive and confidence building. Most institutions today were built for a world of shorter lives and earlier retirements, and that world's disappearing. We're entering an era of longer lives, longer careers, and longer contributions. And in this world, longevity isn't a niche issue. It becomes the context for everything. If you'd like to explore these ideas further, I encourage you to listen to the full Longevity in Action mini-series. Each of these three conversations offers a fascinating glimpse into how organizations are already experimenting with the future. Longevity works best when it becomes almost invisible, when systems quietly evolve around us. The leaders who understand the shift first will not simply adapt to the longevity economy. They are going to help design it. I'm Avivah Wittenberg-Cox, and these are our 4-quarter lives. For more thinking about the impact of our 4-quarter lives, you can read my column at Forbes and subscribe to my Elderberries newsletter on Substack. Let's design lives that aren't just longer, but better.